Hi everyone, my name is Miranda Barth and I teach at Holly High School. I'm going to start us off with reading the introduction to the book, I Wish My Teacher Knew: How One Question Can Change Everything for Our Kids. And this book was written by Kyle Schwartz. I'm going to start by reading just the introduction today. Dowell Elementary is not much different from schools across America. Our 60-year-old school wraps around a 100-year-old oak tree. On the south side of our building is a wide green baseball field. To the east are a soccer field and a vibrant community garden where the kindergarten students plant pumpkins and neighbors grow corn, cabbage, and sunflowers. Embedded into our sidewalk are metal plaques that list facts about each planet in the solar system, and our playground is caped with plastic gray climbing wall that looks like a rock formation. Our school is full of professionals who dedicate themselves to building on our students' strengths and meeting our community's needs. Every morning, families who love their children and who value education struggle to wake up sleepy students and send them off to school. School bells ring and doors fling open to let in eager students. There's a stampede of feet rushing up the stairs and busy hands scrambling to hang up their coats. Just like at every school, each day my students bring so much more than just their backpacks to school. There's no magical device that separates the troubles and joys of their home life as they walk through our doors. Each student brings a lifetime of memories, thoughts, and feelings. As teachers, we need to honor this. We must recognize how these wildly diverse experiences shape our students and impact our academic development. Our school community is strong, but we face challenges that are all too familiar to many schools in America. During the 2013-14 school year, 90% of our students lived in poverty. More than half of our students speak a language other than English at home. In my own classroom, during the 15-16 school year, about 1/3 of my students qualified to receive special education services. There are many schools nationwide with similar statistics. As teachers, we can sometimes become overwhelmed by the very real challenges our students face. But it's equally important to remember our students' strengths. We should place equal value on their interests and curiosities because these passions can motivate our students to become engaged learners. As educators, it is our responsibility to emphasize with the realities our students face and understand how these realities impact their learning. By leveraging the resources within our communities, we can work to remove barriers that hamper our students' ability to learn. There's only one way to do this. It is to form relationships with our students and actively build strong communities inside our classrooms. As educators, we are teaching more than subjects and concepts. We're teaching people. James Comer, a leading child psychiatrist, once said, "No significant learning occurs without a significant relationship." Therefore, as a teacher who is primarily responsible for learning, I am also in the business of relationship building. The most important thing I do in my classroom is to actively build community. Without that, true, passionate, joyful learning is a hard goal to achieve. I do this by creating relationships with my students and their families. I make sure that they feel cared about and heard. Building community begins the very first second I see my students. I show up every day to teach an amazing group of third graders. I clap words into syllables. I collect field trip forms and picture money, and I try to make sure Allie doesn't pour glue on Julia's head again. I make sure to greet my students each morning by saying, "I'm so glad you're here, and I care about you. Do you believe me?" One day, a student responded, "Oh, yes, I know you care about me. You tell me all the time." That was the best eye roll I've ever gotten as a teacher. Creating a sense of community continues throughout the school day. It is the comfortable seats I provide for my students. It happens when I hand them a book I know that they will love, or show my genuine thrill that a yellow belt in karate was finally earned. It is on the way I comfort them when they are hurt and laugh at inside jokes we share. There are a million little ways that I actively build community in my classroom. As you read this book, I am sure you will realize that there are a million little ways you do this in your classrooms and offices every day too. Much to my surprise, one of the little ways I build community went viral. It was a simple exercise. I asked a question and listened for the answer. As a first-year teacher, I worried about how much I didn't know about my students. I explained to them that I wanted to get to know them better. I wrote, "I wish my teacher knew," on the board and asked them to complete the sentence. Each student's response was unique. They responded with honesty, humor, and vulnerability. Sometimes their notes talked about their favorite sport. Sometimes students complained about conflict with siblings or friends. They wrote about their home life and the people who meant most to them. Sometimes they articulated their hopes for the future, and sometimes they explained obstacles they were facing. After completing this lesson, I was amazed at how well it helped me connect with my students. Their notes became a tangible reminder for me to truly listen to the voices of students in my classroom. It was always a meaningful lesson for me, but the problem was that the power of the lesson stayed inside room 207. I did not share that idea with my colleagues. I thought that a simple question wasn't important enough to share. That was until one night when my cat knocked over a basket and out tumbled a crumpled orange note I had saved. In shaking handwriting, it read, "I wish my teacher knew I didn't have pencils at home to do my homework." As I reread those words, I felt the same ache as the first time I had read them. I thought of my former student and how even though she didn't always have access to basic resources, she still came to school every day, so willing to try, willing to struggle, and willing to learn. After years of teaching, I have learned the sad reality is that her situation was far from unique. I wondered what the millions of children in our country's classrooms would say to their teachers if given the opportunity. I decided to share the activity with other teachers. I took a picture of the note with my cell phone and uploaded it to my new Twitter account. I typed in the girl's words and hit the tweet button. My goal in posting this little girl's note was to share a simple message with other educators, that students will share their realities with us if we simply give them an invitation. The real power of this exercise and why so many people responded to it has to do with the raw truth of the students' words. When we are willing to really listen, our students might feel safe enough to express their truth. As teachers, we need to ask so that students will answer, but we also need to listen so our students are heard. Soon I began to get messages from around the world. I heard from teachers inspired to ask their students the same question and who began to share their responses. States away, fellow teachers had their students complete the simple sentence. Notes written on index cards began to form meaningful relationships between teachers and students. Once the responses on social media gained momentum, the news media took notice. A journalist from ABC News wrote a blog post, and the idea took off from there. I was taken aback as news cameras rushed to our school. On one hand, I was surprised that humble handwritten notes could cause such a stir, but on the other hand, I think that the challenges our students face and the incredible work happening daily in our classrooms deserved attention. It should make headline news that there are so many dedicated students who do not have pencils at home, but it doesn't. There should be outrage that many American children attend schools that lack necessary resources to teach them. We need to demand change. We must take action, both inside and outside the classroom, so that the American public education system is worthy of the brilliant students it serves. Harnessing the collective power of the voices of teachers, students, and their families is our best chance of creating the equitable system our country needs. I believe in my students, and not just because that is what I'm supposed to do as a teacher. I hold a firm belief that my students will change the world. I warn each of them that if I don't get an invitation to their graduation, I will show up anyway. I am always telling my students, the day I get to vote for one of you will be the happiest days of my life. And I mean it. I believe in my students because I know them. I see their potential, and I need that potential to be realized so that our city and our world become a better place. Imagine a world in which every child's potential is valued, where every child receives an excellent education they deserve. What would our government look like? What would our neighborhoods look like? What would our schools look like? What would our classrooms look like? What would school be like if we asked students to tell us what we adults don't know? Why my teachers didn't know. Growing up, I hated school. My students are always shocked to hear that their warm and cuddly teacher once felt like a bad apple and acted like a class bully. I hope sharing my experience shows my students that everyone can change and grow like I did. Especially in elementary school, I was that kid who was constantly in trouble. I remember one year I had a teacher who wrote the names of kids in trouble on the whiteboard each day. I don't think she even bothered with the hassle of erasing my name because Kyle S. was constantly on the board. At the point in my life, I said exactly what I thought. At the exact moment I thought it. I never burdened myself with politeness or tact. I challenged anyone with authority. More than once, I found myself inside the principal's office as my parents were informed of my bad behavior. I never imagined I would grow up and become my arch nemesis, an elementary school teacher. I did not always struggle in school until I was 5 years old. I grew up in Farmingdale, an unincorporated community in central Illinois, not too far away from the land worked by my family for over a century. I attended kindergarten at a school surrounded on all sides by cornfields. Like so many of the families whose children I teach now, mine fell on hard times. Both my parents were out of work, and the unemployment money was running out. In the great American tradition, my father headed out west searching for work. Eventually, my father found a job, rented an apartment, and sent for my mother, sister, and me to join him. Our family landed right in the middle of Denver's pre-planned suburban sprawl. Instead of corn tassels, beige roofs blanketed the landscape. I remember wondering why there were so many fences around yards if there were no cows inside. The shift from my small town to suburban life was difficult for me. On the first day of my new school, other students pointed out that I spoke with a country accent and asked me why I wore strange clothes. Another student might have become withdrawn, but I met my classmates' curiosity with hostility. While I had lovely teachers, none appreciated my inability to navigate this cultural shift. Looking back, I'm surprised at the strategies I deployed to cope with the situation in such a pragmatic and ultimately destructive ways. I shut down. I put up my guard, and I decided I didn't need to form relationships with anyone. I didn't need any new friends. I had friends back in Illinois. I even remember thinking, I need to be mean to other kids before they have the chance to be mean to me. And I was only in first grade. As a 9-year-old, I kept a mental list of mean things to say to each of my classmates, just in case the need arose. This was a miserable way to live, and it certainly made everyone around me miserable as well. I was hurtful to my peers, an annoyance to my teachers, and an overall challenge for my gentle, good-natured parents who struggled to manage such a strong-willed child. This feeling lasted well into adolescence and tainted my attitude towards education. I continued to be that kid, the student no teacher wanted in her class list, and what's worse, I knew it. In my mind, there were good kids and bad kids. I longed to be a good kid. The good kids always had nice clothes and combed hair. They said sweet things to the teachers, and they never forgot their backpacks on the kitchen table. It took my full concentration to not interrupt my teacher or blurt out a question, but it seemed like the good kids did not even have to try. They could sit attentively and politely, and most importantly, the good kids knew how to be quiet. I resented how they effortlessly earned the approval of adults and the support of their peers. I'm sure my teachers thought I did not care about school or making friends, but the truth was, I stayed awake at night reliving every mistake of the day. I secretly listened to talk radio at night to distract my mind enough to sleep. I would sometimes have pep talks with myself. I'd say, okay, today you're not going to make that teacher mad. Sometimes it worked, but inevitably I would lack the impulse control to keep quiet or would snap at another student. When a teacher reprimanded me, I refused to show emotion. Instead of crying, I drew miniature teardrops in the corners of my worksheets and pinched the skin on the inside of my wrist. To my teachers, I was a kid who did not care about anyone and was affected by nothing. But in reality, The inner turmoil was eating me alive. Feeling like the bad kid was exhausting. The cycle went on. I misbehaved, got in trouble, acted like I didn't care, and secretly hated myself. Until middle school, when we got real report cards for the first time. Opening up the thick orange envelope, I was shocked to see a line of straight A's. Being the bad kid was ingrained in my identity, and good grades did not fit that image. I had a strange thought. Well, maybe school is a place for me. Something began to change in me. My teachers still struggled with my behavior and challenging attitude, but I softened and began to develop friendships. I joined sports teams and was even elected to student government. After doing the I wish my teacher knew exercise with my students, I began to reflect on my experience in school and how it could have been different. I'm grateful for the teachers who put up with more than their fair share of attitude and still helped me learn. What I realize now is that I never reached out to my teachers. I wish my teachers had known my bad behavior and bravado were a result feeling like I didn't belong. I wish my teachers knew I desperately wanted to please them, even though I appeared apathetic. In retrospect, I am aware of all the benefits I had, even though I felt lost and angry growing up. I lived in a stable, supportive home. My parents provided me with all the resources I ever needed and all the love I could have ever asked for. I never worried about where my next meal would come from or how long I would be able to sleep in the same bed. I did not have a learning disability. I was able to cling to my academic success to pull me out of my troubled behavior. My experience in school was different from many students. Struggles in reading never made me feel inadequate, and math problems never made me feel defeated. My parents had been successful in school themselves, so they understood the concept I was being taught and knew how to help me with my homework. I wonder what my life would be like if any of these factors had been different. Perhaps if I had experienced any additional challenges or discrimination, I might have continued feeling irritated and isolated. I might have forever felt a lingering resentment toward the good kids. I might have thought of school as nothing more than a place where I disappointed the hurt people. If my family's financial situation had been different, I might have seen college tuition as an insurmountable obstacle. My education might have been sacrificed in order to find a place where I felt valued. How many of the students that we teach have my story, but with much different endings? How many of these students with challenging circumstances are slipping through the cracks? My path. I realized just how different my life could have been in 2008 when I moved to Washington, D.C. to work with the education nonprofit City Year. As an AmeriCorps member, I painted murals, scrubbed graffiti off school buildings, and served food to the homeless. I organized volunteer events that invited willing hands to build bookshelves for libraries and clean up city parks. In addition to these activities, I participated in a program called For Love of Children. I was partnered with an energetic kindergartner named Caleb. He was bright, lively, and I absolutely adored him. Caleb and I played word games and practiced writing his name in thick red marker. As the year went on, I realized that what I really wanted to do was work toward giving kids like Caleb a better opportunity to succeed in school. After City Year, I completed college and moved to South America to work in schools in Chile. When I returned stateside, I headed back to my hometown of Denver. I knew that kids deserved dedicated teachers and hoped to become one. I was accepted into the Denver Teacher Residency Program. This program prepares teachers a little bit differently than conventional colleges and universities. I worked as a student teacher for an entire school year while also earning a master's degree in education. The most meaningful component was working side by side in the classroom with a distinguished teacher named Rachel Bernard. Each day, I observed rigorous instruction that supported learners at all levels and had the opportunity to experience the cadence of a full school year firsthand. This wasn't just a few weeks of student teaching. We planned and taught lessons together. I benefited from constant, meaningful feedback from a trusted mentor, a luxury for a novice teacher. The feedback I received from her was not biased, toned down, or full of educational buzzwords. I learned so much that never appeared in any teaching textbook. For example, after I taught my first lesson, Miss Bernard noted, "Next time, you need to address the 4 students in the corner who were having a sword fight with their pencils." Reflecting on my practice as an educator became second nature. But the most important lesson Miss Bernard taught me was that learning does not happen in a vacuum. You have to create a community. During the school year, a new student transferred into our class. The child had experienced deeply traumatic events and had a great deal of difficulty participating in classroom life. I was focused on the challenge that this new student presented, but Mrs. Bernard told me, "Kyle, you have to find something you generally like about each student, even if everything else is hard to manage. You have to hold on to at least one thing you appreciate. If kids think you don't like them, they will not learn from you." Every day, she took time to ask each student what was going on in their life. She celebrated their successes and consoled them when they were hurting. The community built in our classroom was strong. We knew each kid's favorite activities and what they wanted to be when they grew up. Our students that year worked hard and learned so much, but I did too. I learned that my students will carry the relationships created in our classroom with them. Connection and community in the classroom. It's important to remember that the ability to build a connection with children at any age is not a fixed skill that some of us have and some of us do not. All educators can facilitate open communication, build strong relationships, and create a sense of community with the children they interact with. These objectives may not be written in curriculum manuals, but they are as essential to education as math and science. In this book, I offer a perspective on how teachers can create a positive learning environment for every student in every grade. In the chapters that follow, I provide a look at systematic issues like poverty and student mobility that affect millions of students nationwide, alongside problems that affect individual children and families, such as coping with trauma and creating friendships. In addition to statistics and research, I provide real stories from students, teachers, family members that shed light on how we can help students tackle these challenges and grow as individuals. I'll share strategies that have worked in classrooms across America, as well as tips and techniques that have helped me create a community of third graders that dual year after year. The ultimate goal of my work as a teacher, and as the author of this book, is to show my students how to become active and generous members of their communities, both inside and outside their classrooms. I believe I share that goal with you and every educator in America. When we teach students the value of community, we show them how to live and grow among others, how to be generous, compassionate, how to be a good friend, how to help others feel appreciated, and how to contribute to our global community. Fortunately, I find myself in good company, working among millions of strong, dedicated, and generous colleagues and families who share the same mission. Join us in building a community within each classroom that may not only create academic success for children, but also helps create a generation of future adults who seek to welcome and encourage others, who are passionate, lifelong learners, and whose experience in our classrooms made all the difference. Every child deserves an excellent education. Every child deserves to feel cared about and heard. That starts by finding out what our students wish we knew. Thank you.